Hi, Annie here. I just wanted to give you a quick overview on some of the disclosures that you'll be signing. The biggest thing you have to understand is when you're buying a house that's an inherited property in a trust or in probate court, or if the seller is incapacitated and someone is signing on their behalf, legally by law, they are not required to fill out as many disclosures as a typical seller would be. They probably have never lived in the house or haven't lived in it for years, so they can't provide as much information. There's one document that they have to fill out providing as much information as they know, so I'll highlight that. I want to highlight the preliminary title report. The title company pulls that at the beginning of the transaction, and then again at the end. What we're looking for in that are any liens against the property, any easements on the property, who has access to it, and just a few other things we'll look at. And you just know that the title company is working really hard behind the scenes to make sure there's no cloud on title. Someone claims they have some ownership in the property. We'll make sure everything's done right, so by the end, when you get ownership, no one is owed money and no one has any claim to ownership. I'll also go over the natural hazards disclosure. All sellers are required to provide this. They have to pay money to have it provided, and it basically is talking about the location of your home and its proximity to natural hazards. So I'll show you that. And then the termite inspection, it's important to read it thoroughly, but there are a couple of ways you can read it to make it a little easier to understand. And I'll give you a quick overview of just the boilerplate disclosures that all sellers are required to provide. They're not really providing any information, it's just a document highlighting what you should be aware of. So don't hesitate to call me again to talk about anything specifically, but this is just a quick review. So here we go.
So here's what's called the exempt seller disclosure. So we'll have, the address, city, the parcel number. And these are the questions the seller will fill out. One of the big ones, people like to know if there's a death of the occupant in the house in the last 3 years. So if it was 4 years ago, they technically don't have to disclose, but within 3 years, they're required to. If there's any meth labs, is the property adjacent to an industrial use zone? People care if there's an insurance claim affecting the property in the last 5 years, anything affecting the title of the property. They said the title company will talk about that, but if they're aware of that, we need to know, and any material information about the property. So area they can put some extra information. Here's a boilerplate disclosure, the market conditions advisory, basically saying that market conditions change. It's not up to the seller or the agents to determine that. It's really up to the buyer. What are you comfortable offering on a property? Whether you're going to offer a non-contingent offer, what does that mean? What's a loan contingency, an appraisal contingency, and the inspection contingency? Those are the three important ones. During the contingency time, as a buyer, you can back out and get your 3% earnest deposit back, no questions asked. So essentially, they're just telling you, if you are offering a non-contingent offer, be aware, because if something goes wrong with the appraisal or with your loan, or you find something out on the property and you want to back out, you're risking that 3% earnest money. So I will always talk to you more in detail about that. So here's a water heater disclosure. Water heaters are by law required to be braced a certain way. So they talk about that, and that's something I know. So I always check that and make sure the seller straps it right if it's not already. Megan's Law database, that's a website you have access to find out if there's any pedophiles living near you. Now here's a document, the statewide buyer and seller advisory. It is 14 pages of just things you should be aware of, ask the questions. So 14 pages, and honestly, there are a lot of individual disclosures for each of these. So there's a lot of redundancy. So anyway, 14 pages, and then you just sign at the end. As realtors, we are required, whether we represent the buyer or the seller, to fill out what's called the agent visual inspection disclosure. And we are walking around the property just looking for any issues we see, whether there's cracks in ceilings, water damage, if we notice the floor doesn't feel level, if there's, cracks or chips in tile or kitchen countertops, anything that we know of. So we always have to fill that out. So that's just my personal information and observation, I guess I should say. So here's an example of a preliminary title report. This was from a house I helped a buyer buy. At the beginning, it always has the address. And this is the part we want to look at. Who's on title of the house right now? Talks about the legal description of the actual property. Here it talks about, are the taxes paid or are they still outstanding? This talks about a Melrose assessment for the library, $33. It will list any other liens here. And then here's the easements. This is the deed of trust. It says it's an equity line loan, so we'll make sure that any liens on the property, any loans will be paid off. So here's a natural hazards disclosure. There are a couple of companies that provide these. This happens to be JCP, LGS. I use another one, NHD. So they always have an aerial photo, that address. So I always go to this page that has the summary. And the biggest things I'm looking for are a special flood hazard area. If this was marked yes, you would be required to have the additional FEMA flood insurance, which can be costly. We're about $3,000 a year on average. I also look at this fire hazard area because if it's yes, typically that means it's more in the hills, Los Gatos Hills or Los Altos Hills. This could cause some issues with getting property insurance and fire insurance just because of all the fires in California. So I do know of certain companies that will provide insurance if it is in a high fire zone. And it talks about, whether you're in an earthquake area, which I think we all are in California, but there you go. And then it goes on to even talk about more. And finally, I'm going to just go over a termite inspection quickly. Their first pages, they always talk about what kind of termites or issues that they found. They do a little map of the house and point out areas. So the biggest things you should be looking for are Section 1. They break it down Section 1 or Section 2. Section 1 are issues that you should probably address sooner than later. If they, like in this case, they say there should be, the house could be tented for termites. Any active termite activity or any water damage that can continue causing issues, they'll consider Section 1. Section 2 items are things you could probably address later, but it's just to be aware of. Here they also always provide pictures and they label them so you can reference them. And they always provide estimates. So you always look at Section 1. This one happened to be $4,200 estimate. And then they'll provide quotes for Section 2 if it's some work that they would actually do. Otherwise, it just says owner. But Section 1 is what we really care about. $4,200 is very common for this area. Anything under $10,000, I usually am not too alarmed at. I would say typically I'm seeing between $3,000 and $6,000 worth of damage. And truthfully, we can have a lot of the work done by, general contractors or handymen. Just the things that require actual termite, like fumigation or chemical spray, do we actually need a termite company to do? And their costs are always a little bit higher. So I hope that helped a little bit, give you a little bit of information about things you're signing. So call me if you have any specific questions, and I will talk to you soon.